The chlorine-scented air stung Marla Rodriguez's nostrils as she watched Helen Peterson, Hekahevoa Karen, stride across her meticulously maintained backyard, designer sunglasses perched like a weapon of bureaucratic warfare. Marla's right hand instinctively twitched, a muscle memory from 15 years on the Chicago police force that still remembered how to grip a service weapon. "This is a violation," Helen announced, her voice cutting through the peaceful Saturday afternoon like a razor-sharp memo. "Your pool tiles do not conform to Section 4.3 of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association regulations." Marla didn't move. 15 years of dealing with criminals had taught her that the most dangerous predators often wore the most respectable facades, and Helen Peterson was the most respectable facade in their entire suburban development. The pool behind Marla was immaculate. Midnight blue tiles precisely laid, each corner mathematically perfect. She knew every single regulation backward and forward. As a former detective who'd spent years investigating property crimes, Marla understood rules better than most. She'd also learned that rules were tools, not weapons. Helen shifted her weight, clipboard clutched like a sacred text. Her white capri pants remained impossibly crisp despite the summer heat, not a single wrinkle betraying the tension brewing between them. Behind her designer sunglasses, her eyes darted across the pool area, searching for any minute infraction she could weaponize. "The tile grout is precisely 2 millimeters off the approved AHOA standard," Helen continued, her manicured finger pointing accusingly at a nearly imperceptible line near the pool's edge. Marla raised one eyebrow. She faced down gang leaders and corrupt officials during her time on the force. A middle-aged HOA administrator was hardly going to intimidate her. "Interesting observation," Marla responded, her voice calm and controlled. "Would you like to see my documentation?" Helen hesitated. Something in Marla's tone suggested this wouldn't be a typical confrontation. Most neighbors would have already capitulated, apologizing profusely and promising immediate correction. But Marla Rodriguez was not most neighbors. What Helen didn't know was that Marla had spent the past 3 months preparing for exactly this moment. Every tile, every measurement, every potential regulation had been meticulously researched and cross-referenced. She hadn't survived 15 years in Chicago's most challenging precincts by being unprepared. The standoff continued, summer heat pressing down on them like a weighted blanket. Cicadas buzzed in the nearby oak trees, seemingly the only witnesses to this suburban showdown. Helen's perfectly pressed outfit began to show the first hints of perspiration, a crack in her immaculate presentation. Marla's lips curled slightly, not quite a smile, but the hint of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. "Shall we discuss this inside?" she asked, her invitation carrying more steel than hospitality. Helen's grip on her clipboard tightened. This was not going according to her usual script, and in that moment, she realized she might have picked the wrong house and the wrong homeowner. The challenge today. The interior of Marla's home was a stark contrast to Helen's expectations. Each piece of furniture sat with military precision, every surface clean and organized, but not sterile. Framed photographs told a story of a life lived with purpose. Marla, in her police uniform, award ceremonies, teamed photos from her precinct days. Helen perched on the edge of a leather armchair, her clipboard balanced precariously on her knee. She looked like a nervous student about to be called to the principal's office, her earlier bravado deflating slightly in this controlled environment. "Water?" Marla asked, not waiting for a response before pulling 2 glasses from a precisely arranged cabinet. Her movements were deliberate, action telegraphing years of professional training. The kitchen was a testament to Marla's background. Everything in its exact place, nothing wasted, everything purposeful. Helen noticed a series of commendation plaques tucked discreetly near a bookshelf. Chicago PD's Medal of Valor, Community Service Award, Investigations Unit Distinguished Service Medal. "I've reviewed every single HOA regulation," Marla said, sliding a thick binder across the coffee table, "including the supplemental addendums from 2019, 2020, and the most recent update from last quarter." Helen's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the binder. Meticulously organized tabs, color-coded annotations, highlighted sections. This was no amateur's preparation. This was a professional-grade investigation. "Your claim about the pool tiles," Marla continued, "is technically incorrect. Section 4.3, paragraph C, specifically addresses tile alignment. The 2 millimeter variance you're citing is actually within acceptable tolerances." The words landed like precision strikes. Helen's face flushed, not from heat, but from the sudden realization that she might have overstepped. Marla knew exactly what was happening. During her years in law enforcement, she'd encountered countless individuals who thrived on bureaucratic power. Helen was textbook. Someone who found meaning in enforcing minor rules, creating a sense of control in a world that often felt chaotic. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 7 years, Marla said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "I understand the importance of community standards, But I also understand the difference between maintaining standards and harassment. Helen shifted uncomfortably. The photographs around the room seemed to watch her, images of a woman who had literally put her life on the line to protect others. This was not going to be an easy conquest. A framed photograph caught Helen's eye. Marla standing next to a group of fellow officers, all wearing bulletproof vests. The caption read, "Chicago PD Special Investigations Unit, Community Outreach Program. You're in community relations?" Helen asked, a hint of genuine curiosity breaking through her administrative armor. Marla's expression softened momentarily. Bridging gaps, solving problems before they became conflicts. Sound familiar? The implication was clear. Helen had a choice: escalate or collaborate. Outside, the summer afternoon continued its lazy progression. Sprinklers hissed in nearby yards. A distant lawnmower hummed. But inside Marla Rodriguez's meticulously maintained home, a different kind of negotiation was taking place, one where rules, power, and community would be carefully examined. Helen realized with growing unease that she might have picked a fight with exactly the wrong person. The Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association monthly meeting felt like a powder keg waiting to ignite. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an unflattering glow on the assembled neighbors. Helen Peterson sat near the front, her perfectly pressed blazer a shield against potential criticism. Marla Rodriguez settled into a seat at the back, her presence both unobtrusive and undeniably commanding. Board President Gerald Thompson cleared his throat. A balding man in his 60s, he'd been running these meetings with the precision of a small-town bureaucrat for the past decade. "We have a few matters to discuss," he began, his monotone voice already causing several members to stifle yawns. Helen's hand shot up before he could finish his opening remarks. "I'd like to address a serious violation regarding pool tile specifications at 1247 Sycamore Lane." The room collectively turned, following her pointed finger toward Marla. A few neighbors exchanged knowing glances. Helen's reputation for nitpicking was well established. Marla remained perfectly still. Her years on the Chicago police force had taught her the art of controlled response. Every eye in the room was now a potential witness, every ear a potential recorder of events. "Miss Peterson," Gerald interrupted, "we have a specific agenda. Tile complaints are typically handled through written communication and architectural review committee channels." Helen's face reddened. This was not how she planned the confrontation, but the regulations clearly state. "I have the documentation," Marla interjected, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. She pulled out a meticulously organized folder. Comprehensive review of all relevant HOA guidelines, including photographic evidence and precise measurements. The room fell silent. This was not the typical neighborhood drama they were accustomed to. Gerald adjusted his glasses, leafing through the documents Marla had distributed. His bushy eyebrows drew together in concentration. What started as a potential minor dispute was quickly becoming something more complex. Nearby, Tom Richardson, a retired engineer known for his meticulous nature, leaned forward. He'd been on the HOA board for years and had a reputation for technical precision. "These measurements are remarkably detailed," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Helen's earlier confidence began to crack. She'd expected an easy victory, a quick demonstration of her authority. Instead, she was facing a carefully prepared defense that threatened to expose her own overzealousness. Marla knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't just about pool tiles. This was about challenging a system that often allowed petty bureaucrats to wield unchecked power over their neighbors. "The tile installation at 1247 Sycamore Lane," Marla continued, "not only meets but exceeds the minimum standards set forth in the HOA guidelines. Furthermore, I'm prepared to demonstrate how the proposed violation is actually a misinterpretation of Section 4.3. Gerald Thompson looked uncomfortable. This was precisely the type of detailed confrontation he typically tried to avoid. Helen's clipboard, her usual weapon of choice, now seemed like a flimsy prop. Her carefully constructed narrative was unraveling, thread by thread, in front of the entire neighborhood. The fluorescent lights continued to buzz. The air conditioning hummed. But the real electricity in the room came from the confrontation unfolding between Marla Rodriguez and Helen Peterson. A battle of precision, power, and principle. Neither woman was backing down, and the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association meeting was about to become far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. The aftermath of the HOA meeting spread through Oak Ridge Estates like wildfire. Neighborhood group chats buzzed, backyard fences became impromptu discussion zones, and Helen Peterson found herself suddenly the topic of intense scrutiny. Marla Rodriguez hadn't sought the spotlight, but she'd become an unexpected hero to those who long suffered under Helen's bureaucratic tyranny. Neighbors who had previously only whispered complaints now spoke openly about years of Helen's relentless rule enforcement. Sarah Martinez, who lived 2 doors down from Helen, cornered Marla during a morning walk. She tried to find me last year because my mailbox was 3 inches too far from the curb, she confided, her voice a mix of admiration and lingering frustration. Nobody's ever stood up to her like that before. The Rodriguez household became an unexpected center of neighborhood attention. Marla found this both amusing and slightly irritating. She'd spent years learning to blend in, to observe without being observed, a skill honed during her years in law enforcement. Now, her carefully maintained privacy was being chipped away, one neighborly interaction at a time. Helen, meanwhile, was regrouping. She wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. Her home office became a war room of sorts, bulletin boards covered with HOA regulations, printouts, and meticulously color-coded notes. Something about Marla Rodriguez had gotten under her skin. A challenge she couldn't simply file away or regulate into submission. What Helen didn't know was that Marla had been gathering information long before their confrontation. Old police instincts died hard. Every interaction, every complaint, every previous HOA dispute involving Helen was carefully documented. It wasn't personal, it was professional preparation. A week after the meeting, an official envelope arrived at Marla's house. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. The Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association letterhead was unmistakable. Marla's fingers traced the envelope's edge. In her years on the force, she learned that official communication was rarely good news. Something was coming. Inside, a formal notice detailed a comprehensive review of her property. Not just the pool tiles, everything. Setback measurements, exterior paint color, landscaping. Every possible regulation was to be examined with microscopic precision. Helen's revenge was bureaucratic, death by 1,000 regulatory cuts. But Marla Rodriguez wasn't someone who intimidated easily. She faced down gang leaders in Chicago's most challenging precincts. She navigated complex internal investigations. A homeowners association was going to be a walk in the park. As she read through the document, a slight smile crossed her face. They had no idea what they were walking into. The neighborhood held its breath. Something was brewing between Marla Rodriguez and the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, and everyone knew this was far from over. Outside, a sprinkler system clicked on, water arsing perfectly across a meticulously maintained lawn, a small metaphor for the precision about to be unleashed. The digital clock on Marla's home office desk read 2:37 a.m. Scattered across her mahogany desk were police records, HOA documents, and a half-empty mug of black coffee. Years of investigative training had taught her that every system had vulnerabilities, and the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association was no exception. Helen Peterson's vendetta had inadvertently opened a Pandora's box. Each document Marla reviewed revealed more than just neighborhood regulations. There were patterns, subtle inconsistencies that would make any former detective's instincts tingle. A series of property assessment reports caught her eye. Slight discrepancies in valuation. Irregular fee assessments. Nothing egregious enough to raise immediate red flags, but precisely the kind of administrative sleight of hand that Marla had learned to spot during her years investigating white-collar crime. Her laptop screen flickered with open spreadsheets and scanned documents. Cross-referencing became an art form, each cell, each line a potential piece of a larger puzzle. Gerald Thompson, the HOA board president, wasn't going to like what she was uncovering. The first rays of dawn were breaking when Marla's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She recognized the area code, local but not from anyone in her immediate contact list. "Rodriguez," she answered, her voice sharp despite the lack of sleep. "Ms. Rodriguez," a nervous male voice responded, "this is Tom Richardson from the HOA Architectural Review Committee. We need to talk." Tom was the retired engineer who'd been intrigued by her documentation at the last meeting. Something had changed in his tone, a mix of concern and something else. Desperation, perhaps. "I'm listening," Marla replied, her years of interrogation experience filtering every nuance of his voice. What Tom revealed would change everything about the upcoming HOA review, and Helen Peterson had no idea what was coming. The neighborhood of Oak Ridge Estates slept peacefully, unaware that beneath its manicured lawns and perfectly trimmed hedges a storm was brewing. Bureaucratic warfare was about to be waged, with Marla Rodriguez as its unexpected general. A notification popped up on her screen. Another document uploaded to her carefully organized digital archive. Each file was a weapon, each page a potential strategy. Helen Peterson thought she was conducting a routine property investigation. She had no idea she was walking into a trap decades in the making. The morning sun crept higher, casting long shadows across Marla's meticulously organized office. Something was about to break, and when it did, the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association would never be the same. The Richardson family home sat like a time capsule on Oak Ridge Estates' most prestigious street. Mahogany furniture, crystal chandeliers, meticulously maintained landscaping that looked like it had been sculpted by an obsessive artist. Tom Richardson looked smaller in person than he had during the HOA meeting. Age had weathered him, sharp engineer's mind still intact, but body betraying years of precise calculations and indoor work. His hands trembled slightly as he poured 2 glasses of iced tea, the china clinking with each movement. "Helen doesn't know I'm talking to you," Tom began, his voice barely above a whisper. Marla said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence was often the most powerful interrogation technique. People would fill the quiet with their own confessions. Tom's gaze darted between Marla and the windows, as if expecting Helen to materialize and catch him in some unforgivable act of betrayal. "The financial records," he continued, "they don't add up. Not for years." Spreadsheets materialized on the coffee table. Tom's engineer's precision was evident in every carefully annotated column. Irregular fund transfers, unexplained expenses, budget line items that seemed to exist in some bureaucratic shadow realm. "How long has this been going on?" Marla asked, her former detective instincts fully engaged. Tom's laugh was more of a dry, bitter bark. "Longer than you can imagine. Helen isn't just enforcing rules. She's been manipulating them." The story unfolded like a complex investigation. Helen had been using her position on various HOA committees to create a complex web of financial maneuvering. Small amounts, strategically placed. Never enough to trigger an immediate audit, but consistent enough to add up to something significant. "We're talking about more than just improper use of HOA funds," Tom said, pushing a manila folder across the table. "We're talking about systematic manipulation." Marla's fingers traced the edge of the documents. Each page was a breadcrumb leading to a larger story, a story of power, control, and the dangerous game of suburban bureaucracy. Outside, the perfectly manicured lawn in the Richardson home seemed to mock the chaos contained within these walls. Sprinklers clicked on with mechanical precision, water arsing in mathematically perfect patterns. "Why come to me?" Marla asked. The question hung in the air, weighted with implication. Tom's response was immediate. "Because you're the only one who's shown she won't back down. The only one who can actually do something about this." A text message buzzed on Marla's phone. An unknown number. The message was cryptic, just a series of numbers and a date. Another piece of the puzzle, or a warning? The Richardson home seemed to hold its breath. Tom's hands continued to tremble, and Marla Rodriguez realized she was about to be pulled into something far more complex than a simple HOA dispute. Suburban warfare had just escalated beyond pool tiles and mailbox regulations. The Oak Ridge Estates Community Center buzzed with an electricity that had nothing to do with its aging fluorescent lighting. Emergency HOA meeting. Special session. No prior agenda published, a rarity that had everyone's curiosity peaked to a fever pitch. Helen Peterson arrived precisely 17 minutes early, her clipboard freshly organized, her blazer pressed within an inch of perfection. She looked like a general preparing for battle, completely unaware that her entire strategy was about to be dismantled. Marla Rodriguez sat in the back of the room, her posture relaxed but her eyes razor-sharp. Tom Richardson was conspicuously absent, a strategic decision they had carefully planned. Gerald Thompson, the board president, looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed the weight of secrets about to be exposed. His hands shuffled papers with a nervous energy that screamed volumes more than words ever could. "We have some matters to discuss," Gerald began, his voice cracking on the word matters. Helen's hand shot up immediately. "I'd like to address the ongoing investigation regarding property violations at—" "Actually," Marla interrupted, her voice cutting through the room like a surgical instrument, "we'll be discussing financial irregularities." The room went so quiet you could hear the ancient air conditioning unit struggling in the corner. Forensic documentation spread across the tables. Bank statements, transfer records, audit trails that told a story far more complex than simple HOA mismanagement. Years of carefully constructed bureaucratic manipulation now lay bare under fluorescent lights. Helen's perfectly maintained composure began to crack. Her clipboard trembled. Her meticulously applied makeup suddenly looked like a mask about to slip. "Miss Peterson," Marla continued, "would you care to explain these discrepancies?" The documents told a story of small thefts, incremental fund redirections, nothing large enough to immediately trigger alarms, but consistent enough to create a pattern. Helen had been skimming HOA funds for years, using regulatory complexity as her shield. Tom Richardson's earlier information had been just the tip of an iceberg. Marla's investigative skills, honed during years of police work, had uncovered the entire structure. Neighbors leaned forward. Sarah Martinez from 2 doors down, the Johnson family, the retired couple from the corner lot. Everyone knew something significant was happening. Gerald Thompson looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. He had known. Not everything, perhaps, but enough to make him complicit. "I'd want my lawyer," Helen finally said, her voice a whisper that seemed to echo loudly in the suddenly massive room. But it was too late. The carefully constructed world of Oak Ridge Estates HOA was about to change forever. And Marlo Rodriguez, ex-Chicago detective, pool tile defender, bureaucratic truth seeker, had just pulled back the curtain on a neighborhood's darkest secrets. The air conditioning unit rattled. Outside, a sprinkler system clicked on, water arsing across a lawn that suddenly seemed less perfect, less controlled. Everything was about to change.